At 3 a.m. on March 17th, 161 AD, Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius woke up knowing he had maybe hours to live. His body was failing. His empire was crumbling. And yet, the words he wrote in his journal that night would become the most powerful tool for handling fear that humanity has ever discovered. What he wrote wasn't a prayer. It wasn't hope. It was something far more useful. If you're over 40, you've probably noticed something. The fears that kept you up at night in your 20s look ridiculous now. But the new fears? Health declining, time running out, watching parents age, wondering if you've made the right choices, career feeling like it's peaked, relationships changing, kids growing up and leaving, the mirror showing someone you barely recognize. These hit different, and Marcus Aurelius, dying at 58, knew exactly what you're feeling. Here's what makes this fascinating. Marcus wasn't just some philosopher in a library writing pretty quotes for Instagram. He was the most powerful man on earth, dealing with a pandemic that killed 5 million people, constant war on multiple fronts, the betrayal of his closest advisors, a wife rumored to be unfaithful, and the knowledge that his own son, Commodus, would destroy everything he built. He had every reason to be paralyzed by fear. But he developed a 3-step technique that modern psychology now confirms actually rewires your brain's response to fear. And you can use it today, right now. In fact, by the end of this video, you'll have a practical system that took Marcus decades to develop. But first, let me tell you why this matters specifically if you're over 40, because the kind of fear you're dealing with now is fundamentally different than what you faced at 25. When you're young, fear is usually about gaining things. Will I get the job? Will they love me? Will I succeed? Those fears are sharp, but they're forward-looking. They have energy. After 40, fear shifts. Now, it's about losing things. Losing time. Losing health. Losing relevance. Losing the people you love. Losing the version of yourself you used to be. This kind of fear is heavier. It sits on your chest at 3 a.m., and it whispers that your best moves are behind you. Marcus Aurelius called this the terror of time's passage. And he knew something that most motivational speakers today completely miss. You can't fight this fear with positivity. You can't affirm your way out of mortality. You need something stronger. Marcus wrote, "Frightened of change? But what can exist without it?" Here's what he meant. Most of our fear isn't about what's actually happening. It's about the story we tell ourselves. At 40, 50, 60, you start thinking, I'm too old to start over. I missed my chance. My best years are behind me. Marcus would call this garbage. Not because it's negative, but because it's imprecise. Instead, he'd force himself to write the exact fear. I'm afraid that if I leave this job I hate, I won't find another one and I'll lose my house. That's specific. That's workable. That's not the vague dread that keeps you frozen. The Stoics believe that most suffering comes from fuzzy thinking. When you're lying awake at 2 a.m., your brain is running disaster simulations with NO details. Everything will fall apart. I'll end up alone. I wasted my life. These aren't thoughts. They're horror movies with no script. Marcus would grab his journal and write, what specifically am I afraid of? What is the worst that would actually happen? And have I survived worse? Let me give you a real example. Say you're 52 and you're terrified about your health because you just saw your doctor and your numbers aren't great. The vague fear sounds like, I'm falling apart. It's all downhill from here. I'm going to end up sick and dependent. Marcus would make you rewrite it. I'm afraid that my high blood pressure will lead to a heart attack, and I'll die before I see my grandchildren grow up, and my family will struggle financially. Now, you have something to work with. Because the next question is, what can I do today about blood pressure? Can I walk for 20 minutes? Can I reduce salt? Can I take the medication? Can I get life insurance in order? Suddenly, the shapeless dread becomes a list of actions. This is the magic of precision. Modern neuroscience backs this up. When you force yourself to articulate a fear precisely, you activate your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that problem solves, instead of your amygdala, which just panics. You literally shift from reptile brain to human brain. But here's where it gets deeper. Marcus didn't just name his fears once. He had a practice. Every morning, before he dealt with the empire, he'd write down what he was afraid of that day. He'd look at his list and ask, Is this fear about something real or something I'm imagining? Because here's what he discovered. About 80% of what we fear never happens. And of the 20% that does happen, most of it is survivable. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own." That sounds pessimistic, but it's not. It's preparation. He's naming exactly what he fears about his day, so when it happens, he's not caught off guard. He's not wasting emotional energy being shocked that people are difficult. You can do this. Tonight, before bed, write down 3 specific fears you have. Not, "I'm anxious about everything," but "I'm afraid my daughter won't call me back. I'm afraid my back pain means something serious. I'm afraid I'll never feel passionate about anything again." Just the act of writing them down reduces their power by about 40%, according to research on expressive writing. Your brain stops running the same loop when it knows the fear has been acknowledged. This is the most famous Stoic technique, and most people get it completely wrong. Marcus wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." People think this means just don't care about things you can't control. That's not it. That's suppression, and it doesn't work. That's toxic positivity wearing a toga. Here's what it actually means. Make a 2-column list. Column 1, things I can control right now. Your effort, your response, the next phone call you make, whether you go for a walk, how you speak to your spouse today, what you eat for breakfast, whether you send that email, how you react when someone cuts you off in traffic. Column 2, everything else, the economy, other people's opinions, whether you get the diagnosis, what happened in the past, how much time you have left, whether your kids make good choices, what your boss thinks of you, inflation, aging, the weather. Now here's the key that nobody tells you. You're allowed to care about column 2. You're allowed to be afraid. Marcus was terrified of dying and leaving his empire to his incompetent son, Commodus. He didn't pretend not to care. He loved his son. He was heartbroken that Commodus wasn't ready. He knew, with painful clarity, that everything he'd built would likely crumble. But he refused to spend energy on it. Every ounce of his focus went to column 1. What could he do today to prepare Commodus? Who could he put in place to guide him? What systems could he strengthen? He couldn't control whether Commodus would be a good emperor. He could control whether he tried his absolute best to prepare him. When you're over 40 and you're watching your body change, or your career plateau, or your parents decline, this is your lifeline. You can't control aging. You can control whether you move your body today. You can't control the past. You can control whether you make that difficult phone call you've been avoiding. You can't control whether your adult children make the choices you'd make. You can control whether you tell them you love them. The peace doesn't come from not caring. It comes from knowing where to I am. Let me tell you a story about how Marcus used this in the most painful way possible. His wife, Faustina, was rumored to be having affairs. The entire Roman court was gossiping. People expected him to rage, to punish, to make a spectacle. Instead, Marcus asked himself, what do I control here? He controlled his response. He controlled his dignity. He controlled whether he let gossip dictate his actions. He couldn't control whether the rumors were true. He couldn't control what Faustina did or didn't do. He couldn't control what people said about him. So he focused on column 1. He treated Faustina with respect. He refused to engage with the gossip. He continued to lead with integrity. When she died, he mourned her genuinely. And history remembers him as a man of principle, while the gossips are forgotten. Now, I'm not saying you should ignore problems or accept mistreatment. Marcus would never say that either. What I'm saying is, in any situation, ask yourself what you actually control and put 100% of your energy there. Here's a modern example. You're 48 and you just got passed over for a promotion. You gave everything to that company. You're angry. You're hurt. You're scared you plateaued. Column 2, things you don't control, the decision that was made. Whether your boss is fair. Whether the person who got promoted deserved it. What your coworkers think. The past 10 years of work. Column 1, things you do control. How you respond in a meeting. whether you ask for feedback, whether you update your resume, whether you develop new skills, whether you start networking, whether you let this define you, whether you stay bitter or get strategic. Marcus would tell you, feel the anger. That's human. Acknowledge the hurt. That's real. Then ask, where can I put my effort that will actually change my situation? This is where most people over 40 get stuck. We spend years ruminating on things we can't control. The opportunity we missed, the relationship that ended, the body we used to have, the economy we can't change. And while we're ruminating, we ignore the small things we can control today that would actually improve our lives. Marcus had a practice for this too. At the end of each day, he'd review his actions and ask, did I spend my energy on what I control, or did I waste it on what I don't? When he caught himself obsessing over things in column 2, he had a phrase he'd repeat. This is not my concern. Not in a dismissive way, but as a redirecting tool. My son's choices as an adult are not my concern. My concern is whether I've taught him well. The senator's betrayal is not my concern. My concern is whether I've acted with integrity. You can use this today. When you catch yourself spinning on something you can't control, say out loud, this is not my concern. My concern is, and finish with something from column 1. The hardest part of this technique after 40 is accepting that you can't control outcomes anymore, even outcomes you desperately care about. You can't control whether your aging parents stay healthy. You can't control whether your marriage survives. You can't control whether you get another 30 years or 30 days. But Marcus would say, that's exactly why you need this technique. Because the less time you have, the more important it is to spend your energy wisely. This is the technique that sounds crazy but changes everything. Marcus would deliberately sleep on the floor sometimes. He'd skip meals. He'd wear simple clothes even though he was emperor. He'd take cold baths. He called it training for adversity. His reasoning was brilliant. If you only experience comfort, then discomfort becomes terrifying. Your brain thinks any deviation from comfort is an emergency. So when real hardship hits, you crumble. But if you practice discomfort voluntarily when nothing is wrong, then when adversity comes in voluntarily, your brain goes, oh, this is unpleasant. But I've been unpleasant before. I know I can handle this. Here's why this matters at 40 plus. Most of our fear is fear of discomfort. We're not actually afraid of starting over. We're afraid of the awkwardness, the uncertainty, the feeling of being a beginner again. We're not afraid of aging. We're afraid of the discomfort of not being as capable as we were. We're not afraid of being alone. We're afraid of the discomfort of Saturday nights with no plans. So we build our entire lives around avoiding discomfort. We stay in jobs we hate because job searching is uncomfortable. We avoid difficult conversations because conflict is uncomfortable. We don't try new things because looking foolish is uncomfortable. We don't go to the doctor because bad news is uncomfortable. And then one day, life forces discomfort on us. We get laid off. We get sick. Someone leaves. And we fall apart because we have no tolerance built up. Marcus saw this in his soldiers. The ones who only knew comfort panicked in battle. The ones who had trained in harsh conditions stayed calm. So he applied the same principle to psychology. You don't have to sleep on the floor. But what if once a week you did something uncomfortable on purpose? Not to be miserable, to build your tolerance. Here's a practical list for people over 40. Have the conversation you've been avoiding. The one with your spouse about the distance growing between you. The one with your adult child about their choices. The one with your boss about your future. The one with your doctor about your symptoms. Try something you think you're too old for. Take the dance class. Sign up for the 5K. Learn the instrument. Start the business. Post a thing online. Ask the question in the meeting. The discomfort of being a beginner is excellent training. Spend a day without your usual comfort mechanism. If you usually cope with wine, skip it for a day. If you usually cope with shopping, don't buy anything. If you usually cope with social media, delete the apps for 24 hours. Feel the discomfort underneath. Get familiar with it. Do something that risks rejection. Apply for the job you think you're not qualified for. Ask someone on a date. Pitch the idea. Submit your writing. Invite people to the thing. The no won't kill you, and practicing hearing no voluntarily prepares you for the involuntary ones. Sit with physical discomfort. Skip a meal and feel hunger. Take a cold shower. Go for a walk in bad weather. Hold a plank until it burns. Your body needs to remember it can handle unpleasant sensations without catastrophe. Marcus would do this before big decisions. Before he had to make a hard choice, he'd fast for a day or sleep on a hard surface. He wanted to make sure his judgment wasn't being driven by his need for comfort. He wanted to know, if things get uncomfortable, will I still stand by this choice? There's a deeper reason this works after 40. The second half of life is going to be uncomfortable, whether you like it or not. Bodies decline. People die. Careers end. Kids leave. The world changes in ways that feel disorienting. You have two choices. You can spend the rest of your life resenting every discomfort and trying desperately to cling to comfort, which will make you brittle and fearful. Or you can build voluntary discomfort into your life now, which will make you resilient and calm. Marcus wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." The fear you're feeling right now, about time running out, about missed opportunities, about decline, the Stoics would say that fear is a signal. It's your soul telling you that you're living too small, that you're protecting yourself from discomfort instead of doing what matters. Every day you avoid the uncomfortable conversation is a day you stay stuck. Every day you don't try the thing because you might fail is a day you prove to yourself that you're too fragile for life. Every day you choose comfort over growth. You're choosing slow death over real living. Marcus knew he was dying. He had maybe months, and he spent those months on the freezing frontier, leading his troops, sleeping in a tent, writing philosophy in the early morning cold. He could have gone back to Rome. He could have spent his final days in a palace. But he chose discomfort because it kept him alive in the ways that mattered. The question is, what discomfort are you avoiding that, if you faced it, would actually set you free? So let's bring this together. You're over 40. You're dealing with fears that your younger self couldn't even imagine. Time is feeling more precious and more scarce. The stakes feel higher. The margin for error feels smaller. Marcus would tell you, this is exactly when you need these 3 practices most. Every single day, take 5 minutes to name your fears precisely. Write them down. What specifically are you afraid of? Not the vague dread, the actual thing. Then make your 2 columns. What can you control today? What can't you control? Put 100% of your energy in column 1. When you catch yourself obsessing over column 2, redirect. This is not my concern. My concern is, and once a week, practice voluntary discomfort. Do the thing you've been avoiding. Have a conversation. Try the thing. Sit with the unpleasant feeling. Build your tolerance. These 3 practices, done consistently, will change your relationship with fear completely. Not because the fear goes away, but because you stop being controlled by it. On that night in 161 AD, dying in his military tent, Marcus Aurelius wrote his final entry. Death smiles at us all. All we could do is smile back. He wasn't being morbid. He was being free. He'd spent decades training himself to focus on what he controlled, to name his fears precisely, and to stop running from discomfort. And because of that, he could face the ultimate fear with calm. You have the same tools he had. Actually, you have better ones because you're not fighting a pandemic without modern medicine or running an empire that's being invaded. You're not sleeping in a freezing tent on the frontier. You just need to start using them. So here's my question for you, and I really want you to answer this in the comments. What's the one specific fear that's been keeping you frozen? Not, I'm anxious about getting older, but the precise thing. I'm afraid I'll regret not starting that business. I'm afraid my marriage is slowly dying and I don't know how to save it. I'm afraid I wasted my best years. Be brutally honest like Marcus would. Write it in the comments. Put it into words. That's step 1. And if you want the next video where I break down Marcus Aurelius' technique for handling regret about the past, subscribe right now, because that one goes even deeper. Hit the like button if you're ready to stop running from discomfort and start building the tolerance that will carry you through whatever's coming. I'll see you in the next one.